Euromoney Jordan Conference. I hope you all enjoyed the sessions today. I'm Rebecca Chamberlain and I am excited to be part of this special session titled How Entrepreneurship Can Drive Growth. We'll be discussing Jordan's entrepreneurial environment and exploring what role it can have in Jordan's overall growth. As we've heard today, unemployment in Jordan has reached a high rate of 18.5%, with the figure for youth unemployment now an alarming 36%. However, we've also heard a number of initiatives aimed at encouraging entrepreneurship have been established in Jordan, with job and wealth creation as well as economic growth growing a motivator. Now, I'm certainly no expert on the subject, but I'm very happy to be joined by 5 people who are Dr. Mohammed Al-Jafari, instead to call him just Mohammed. Yep. Chairman of the Jordan Innovative Startups and SMEs Fund, Sham Al-Mir, a partner at Forsan, Emil Kafesi, managing partner at Silicon Valley, Reen Hussos, managing director of Endeavour Jordan, and Yusuf Wadi, chairman and chief executive officer of Restaurant. We also have a poll relevant to this session. I know you've been answering them all day. Thank you for that. Thank you for your input. If we can see our poll question, I'm going to ask you now, and then I'll ask you again at the end of the session, because I have a feeling some of you may change your minds. Poll question? So we have an overwhelming response there to the regulatory environment. So we'll come back to this poll at the end and see if anyone no longer thinks that or if they've changed their mind. Dr. Mohammed, apologies Mohammed, starting with you and then moving round to everyone. If I can briefly ask you to introduce yourself and your institution.
Well, thank you very much. I work for the Jordan Loan Guarantee Corporation. The Jordan Loan Guarantee Corporation is a public shareholding company, but we assume the responsibility of being the implementing agency of the ISSF, the Innovative Startup and SMEs Fund in the country. So I was invited in this capacity, being the chairman of the Innovative Startups and SMEs Fund that was recently established. Actually, we started the work on this project about 1.5 years ago, but finally we completed all the documents and the CEO of the company was formally appointed last week. Any further details about the question? About the fund? Well, it's an initiative that came from the central bank about 1.5 years. And it's a joint investment between the Central Bank of Jordan and the government of Jordan. But the money that was placed in the project from the government came as a soft loan from the World Bank. So the main stakeholders in this particular project are the Central Bank of Jordan, the government, and the World Bank. The total investment in this fund is about $100 million US, and it is the largest investment as a fund of funds that intends to be a VC fund in the country, and I could assume even it's one of the largest in the region. We have noticed that there is really a big need for investment in that particular types of the project, the innovation in general in the country. And I'm sure all of you are aware that the central bank has adopted many initiatives to improve access to finance, but the issue is not about improving the access to debt finance. There is a serious problem when it comes to equity finance, particularly for innovation and management. Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about Forsan?
Sure. Forsan Group, Forsan is a private equity player. Forsan invests sector agnostic and so we invest in a variety of sectors. We're a bit later stage than venture capital firms, and I've heard a number of comments referring to private equity, so that was very heartening, and excited to be on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Emil, if I can pass over to you.
Sure. My name is Emil Kafesi. I'm a managing partner at Silicon Valley. I think you can probably characterize me as a significant believer in the innovation potential of Canadian entrepreneurs. We invest capital, provide expertise, and support for startups based in predominantly in Jordan to be able to scale and grow their businesses. Our focus is technology. Our ticket sizes are between 200,000 to 3 million per venture, and we've made around 14 investments in Jordan so far. We also manage a wider portfolio. We invest in the United States as well, in what's called essentially pre-seed, pre-demo-day investing.
Thank you. Reem, can you tell us?
Reem Ksous. I'm the managing director of Endeavor. Endeavor is a global organization that is currently present in 60 cities around the world. Our office was established 10 years ago. The main objective of Endeavor is to basically look for, select high-impact entrepreneurs and fast-growing companies, and help them through mentorship and other, a variety of services, including access to finance, access to talent, access to mentorship support, not just at the local level, but also at the global level, to help them to scale and grow and create quality jobs that we so direly need, and also have a very positive impact on economic growth. We don't focus on a specific sector. We're only concerned with businesses that have the potential to grow and scale. So we have companies in the agricultural sector, F&B, EdTech. They're not all necessarily tech-enabled companies. We do have businesses in the more traditional sphere, but they are businesses that are actually innovative in their own way and scaling and growing.
Thank you. Yusuf, I'm dying to hear about this job.
My name is Yusuf Wadi. I'm the CEO and founder of Nestrom. I'm what they call the entrepreneur. So Nestrom is an agricultural technology company that we started to help farms build the proper value chain inside of their farm so they can actually export their goods for the best amount of value globally. Nestrom is 1 year old. This is my third venture, or my third startup. That some of them went really well, some crashed dramatically. But overall, this is what Nestrom is. I'm also part of the ICT Advisory Council chaired by the Prime Minister, where we help figure out how to fix, change regulations to help startups find the right path and continue growing without any red tape. So that's me.
Endeavor entrepreneurs. Thank you for introducing yourselves. I'll start traditionally with ladies first. Reem, I'll begin with you. What is entrepreneurship, if you could kind of sum it up that easily, and value creation? I know we'll talk about scaling later, but for now, just a brief kind of.
I think from what I'm seeing, the entrepreneurs that we support, they're very innovative, highly driven people. They're very passionate about the product or the service that they are developing. They want to create, growth. They want to expand. And they want to make a difference wherever they are. So, and they're also people who give back. This is something that we see in successful entrepreneurs. So they're not just business people or creative and innovative people who are just out there to capture, market share and generate profits, but they're really people who care about the ecosystem, about giving back, about creating other successes within the ecosystem as well.
We were talking about this in the pre-panel about what would make an entrepreneur versus just someone in business. Does anyone disagree with anything that we've said? Does anyone have anything to add to what is an entrepreneur?
I mean, there's an interesting idea about what constitutes or what defines an entrepreneur. If we think of traditionally of someone who works in a particular company and then leaves that company to set up his own company, we often conflate, I think, these terms and think this person may be an entrepreneur. And it can be small scale to large scale. You could be an attorney working in a law firm, leave it and set up their own law firm. you employ new people, and then there's an idea that this person is entrepreneurial and set up his own business. But there's a lot of people, some conventional wisdom would challenge that and say, look, these guys are small business owners or MSMEs, and they're not entrepreneurs, and maybe say the entrepreneurs are more people like that, people who are bringing in really innovative, new ideas, not present in the market. They may be completely innovative to the market, but not innovative to the globally. So that they may bring in e-commerce, they may bring in e-payment. So sometimes I think we conflate between small business owners and entrepreneurs, but we all have, with the intention, very good intention, that we are trying to see how can we create jobs and fight poverty, because those are the two pillars that are underpinning our economy.
Yes, please do. Is this microphone on here?
Yeah, so just to add one point, look, I keep it simple, and I think it's particularly relevant from the basis of Jordan. To me, an entrepreneur is anybody who takes a risk. And frankly, I think anybody who sets up a business in Jordan, irrespective of the nature of the business, is taking a risk. And I think, I nod my head to that. What is Jordan ideally suited for in terms of entrepreneurship is a different definition. I think the opportunity that Jordan presents to entrepreneurs is not one that is linear, that is one that is exponential and export focused or outward focused. So that's where kind of our focus is. I think this died, but there's not much more to say, so I'll stop here.
We didn't cut you off then, I promise. We didn't decide you were finished. Actually, I'm going to...
We had this discussion actually about the exact definition of the entrepreneurs when we were sitting upon and thinking about the right name for our fund. So what we came up with, it's the name of the fund, Innovative Startups. This is how we define the entrepreneurs according to our own project. So the name of the project, Innovative Startups, is something to think from our perspective. Thank you.
So that's the time-saving answer there.
There's also, if I may, there's this idea of an intrapreneur with an I, and you see that people working at large companies. I'm looking at Petra, one of our startup companies here. You can be an entrepreneur within a large organization if that organization mentors you and affords you the opportunity to create and innovate within that structure. Then you can be an entrepreneur and an innovator within that structure. And many companies from a small level to highly sophisticated level say, look, if you are able to come up with a new idea to improve marketing or cut costs or improve production, then we will pay you X, or you will be afforded the opportunity to do Y. And that incentivizes people to start thinking outside the box and not just do their own jobs. And we've seen many examples of that within Jordanian companies.
Emil, my next question is for you again. I hope your microphone works. What wider role do you think the private sector has to play in catalysing innovation and growth in entrepreneurship?
Okay. I think the wider role there's a lot, right? I think when I look across all sectors of the economy, I think it could all do with a greater boost of innovation to drive it forward. I think in many ways Jordanian businesses are very lucky today because they're at a time in an era when just about everything needs to be fixed in the region. So whether we're talking about innovation in education, whether we're talking about innovation in financial services, in healthcare, even renewables, wherever you look, there's certainly enough problems for entrepreneurs to solve. And I think one of the two things that I would encourage the private sector to do, one of them is to partner with startups, to partner with entrepreneurs, to look at innovation from outside of their own walls, and to enable, kind of driven, motivated, passionate problem solvers to do their job best under the umbrella of a larger organization. So that's one. And I think that in and of itself will encourage greater competitiveness, it will encourage greater liquidity, and the list can go on and on. And we're starting to see this. I tip my hat off. First of all, to the Arab Bank, they set up a venture arm, Faisal sitting there, Hikma Ventures. You're starting to see this happen. I would strongly encourage, he's got strategic investors. Yeah. So he has strategic investors. So we're starting to see more and more of that. And the cap tables, the investors that are coming in to help build the next generation of Jordanian opportunity, is coming from private sector that has succeeded in the past and that not just wants to give back, but wants to compete, wants to recompete. So I think that's really exciting. I think the other thing for all of us as a private sector is we need to be patient. I mean, that's one thing I strongly encourage. One of the biggest challenges that I see in the investments that we make and in the challenges that they face, there's generally a lot of, I don't want to call it pessimism, but there's a lot more opportunity than we realize. And I just think we need to be patient with these founders. We've got a good amount of next generation Jordanians that are building really special things. It's not evident now, but we're going to wake up one day and be very, very proud.
Thank you. This next question isn't directed to anyone. I strongly suspect you'll all have something interesting to say about it, so it's a question for all. Do you think Jordan provides an equal and enabling environment for entrepreneurs and SMEs to set up their businesses with?
Can I speak on
Please,
this
yeah.
one? So if you compare it globally, and if you look at how things changed over years, I highly believe that we're moving in that right direction. We are somewhere that's very good. There's a lot more to be done, but I've been traveling around for a while now, and we've been talking to people in different areas. And if you look at it, I would say top of the line, people that change really fast is Estonia. And then if you look at other countries that are still to catch up, which is interesting, is we thought India at a certain point had no problems with regulatory problems or red tape or whatever it is, but believe it or not, they do, and they have some problems that we're lucky that we don't have. So I would say we're somewhere in the middle of the scale with a trajectory towards getting a lot better over time.
Reem, you must have a lot of...
Yeah, I mean, definitely this is the sentiment that is expressed by the entrepreneurs that we work with. I mean, it's true there are some, aspects of the regulatory environment or the tools that are out there that might, prohibit or act against companies scaling and growing. And the size of the market is probably another aspect. But we are seeing success stories really that we can celebrate. And they are working around all these issues and finding their way, basically.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anyone else have anything to add about the environment? Maybe what barriers are there?
I'll be a bit of a contrarian here. So I think what's interesting is if you think of funds, whether they're venture capital funds, similar to the one that's recently been established by the central bank and the IMF, or the general vernacular surrounding VC and entrepreneurship endeavor, a lot of the businesses, the investors that typically invest in this field, you'll notice that business is conducted in English. And if you think about that and you start thinking of Jordan, there are a lot of entrepreneurs who may be precluded from having access to such avenues or to these investors or to even the entire ecosystem because of either a linguistic or other variants. So sometimes it's, again, defies conventional wisdom a little bit, but there may be entrepreneurs or innovators with terrific ideas and terrific backgrounds that either unable to access or we're unable to access them because of such barriers.
Absolutely. Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. I don't think we've ever been biased from that perspective, just from our own investment thesis. The way that it matters when it comes to exponential thinking, just in terms, if you're building a global product, I'll give you an example. Mixed Dimensions, one of our portfolio companies. Two guys out of Princess Sumaya University started off in probably 2011. Yeah, 2010, 2011. We were their first investors. About 3-4 days ago, they signed a huge deal with Star Trek. So these are two guys out of PSUT, had to learn to globalize to get the full potential of their technology, which is today being used by Star Trek Online. It's an inflection point for the company. This is a company that's raised probably $6-7 million of Silicon Valley or US-based venture investing. part of our role was helping them globalize. So it's not just language, but if we're aiming for the stars, we have to recognize the opportunity that Jordanian entrepreneurs have is a global opportunity. When we talk about resilience is looking beyond Iraq, beyond Syria, beyond our natural borders as economic opportunity, but taking on the world and contributing to global innovation. And that's where I would say the globalization matters. Not to disagree, but just to emphasize the significance of it.
If I may add here, I think the ecosystem that we have in Jordan is not the optimal ecosystem that we're looking for. But basically, many positive changes have taken place in terms of the institutions that we have in the system, and in terms of the regulations are being revised and revised and revised. I think we're moving in the right direction. What I look for that if we go a little bit more faster, just to reach the right enabling ecosystem for the entrepreneurship in the country. There are some missing puzzles here and there are some missing points here and there that we need to work on. But initially, the very good thing that whenever we talk to people about the ecosystem and the challenges that we have in the ecosystem, it seems that everybody reads from the same page. We identify exactly the missing links and what needs to be done. Many steps have been taken and many others are there, and the ultimate objective actually for the ISSR fund is to improve the ecosystem, is to create the market, is not to make the investment and to achieve certain realized return in the ecosystem, is to improve it and push it as much as possible in collaboration with different stakeholders in the system.
So we've touched on the regulatory environment. Yusuf, I was going to ask you, particularly if you thought the regulatory environment here needs to change on the basis of it's not bad, but it's not great.
Yeah.
So what sort of changes do you think would you kind of like to see?
There's a lot of, when you look at startups, the way we try to build things is within that first year, you have to just grow really, really fast. And sometimes there's certain bureaucratic steps, like certain limits and walls that you find in the way that you don't expect that come out of nowhere. And then these are the ones that will drive you back. So if you're running to get to your KPI by 1 year and then suddenly there's this wall that comes out of nowhere because something is unclear in certain regulations, that could hold you back. We had these examples with multiple companies where NXT is one of them, Radio Weather, Nestron. So basically, we tried to import something that suddenly there was no regulation around it, and it just got stuck for a while. And when it gets stuck, it gets stuck. I don't know. It's not like 2-3 days or a month of stuck. We're talking about 6-7 months, sometimes 2 years.
Yeah.
So making things move faster, figuring out. Basically, the way we suggest a lot of things. But what we're trying to suggest here is at least we need to figure out how we can create a certain zone or a free zone where if you can put all the startups in there and just import whatever you want. If you import a UFO, you know what you're talking to about it, and just don't get it out into the city and just work on it in there, so that then you can start working on the regulations on how can I take it out into the city. So basically, you have to find these buffer zones in regulations on figuring out what can I do till then, so that you don't start killing innovation because innovation is moving extremely fast.
Yeah. Please.
Yeah, if I may add, I think what's missing also in Jordan is that we don't have a true champion or entity for entrepreneurship in Jordan, and this has been really a major setback. We don't have a strategy or even policies that address it separately. So you see entrepreneurship or SME development being addressed through policies like the National Employment Strategy or the Export Strategy. But a strategy or a plan per se for, that addresses SME growth or entrepreneurship and an entity that actually follows up on all these issues. We currently have JETCO, which is now the de facto entity. It's because basically all donor support has been pouring into this entity. But once donor money dries up, then we don't see that entity playing that role anymore. So I think this is also something that's important and is missing in the ecosystem.
Yeah, please.
So just one more, just to build on those 2 points. I would love to see, if I had my dream with the public sector, I would love to see a hard reset of state of mind. I don't care what the policies are, but just a hard reset in terms of state of mind, in terms of what the priorities should be around the enforcement and the application of those policies. So as long as policy is consistent, I think entrepreneurs will hack or they'll figure their way around it. I'm less worried about what's on paper and more around the attitude of how it's enforced or how it's thought of. So really, we have to recognize that we're going to do a lot more failing than we are succeeding to ultimately succeed as a country. And I think the more we encourage entrepreneurs to fail, and the more we create an environment where we don't, we make liquidating a company easy. We're, as a state of mind, even with state-owned companies or even with economic zones, we simplify the process and understand the culture around innovation and support that, the better off we'll be. I'll give you a simple example. One of our companies was in an economic zone, and they didn't pay their rent on time, which is not dramatic when it comes to a startup. We can have this debate all we want, but it's not the end of the world. The economic zone wrote an email to every single shareholder that included global shareholders, regional shareholders, asking them to tell the CEO of the startup to pay rent. That's a cultural barrier where you've got a global investor who's made about 15, 20 investments in Jordan starting to worry about, do these people get it? It's a small point, but I'm saying these things add up. And I think for us to have a culture of understanding and a culture of tolerance for failure would take us a lot further, I think.
Just one last thing to add on this.
Sure.
There's one last thing that I think would help a lot, is basically the collective voice of entrepreneurs in Jordan. So one thing that's happening is there's Endeavor, there's a whole bunch of other entrepreneurs. One thing that entrepreneurs are good at is they're loudmouths. And when you want to disrupt something, we disrupt something. And when we have problems with the government, we literally take it all the way up to the royal court and we just shout our guts out. So we try to figure something out. So sometimes it'd be interesting if we could just unify things into a certain way where you can find the champions inside of the government, like Reed said, that can help us drive that as well. And just unify that voice into a certain stream so that we can just break through easily and a lot faster.
Sounds like you're both giving yourself some possible work there. Do you have anything to add on the regulatory environment?
Well, I think the missing issues that we need really to work on very quickly from the regulatory environment perspective. Up to this point of time, we don't have VC regulation yet. So we can establish businesses, but we cannot set up funds in Jordan yet. The issue of the double taxation needs to be resolved as quickly as possible. The issue of solvency, it has been there for years and has not been resolved yet. The issue of the registration of the movable assets, the regulation has not passed yet. So there are specific issues that need to be done as early as possible. These are quick fixes that we need to take action. Otherwise, the ecosystem will not make the needed shift. It will not continue. It will not be an attractive ecosystem. So these are specifically what I have in mind, and there must be certain strategy to fix them as possible.
Thank you. Actually, my next question is for you, Sham. If I can ask you, what do you think, or how are the multilaterals in the government promoting entrepreneurship in Jordan? What sort of examples can you give?
I mean, one Dr. Ahmed referred to was the establishment of this venture capital fund. So that's a $100 million fund that will support venture capital in Jordan entrepreneurs. That's acting as a fund of funds, so that's a great initiative. That's one of the EPC, the Economic Policy Council's recommendations. The central bank itself has made over the last few years almost $400 to $500 million available for entrepreneurs. There's the multilaterals themselves, IFC, BRD, and others are also investing in Jordan through funds, private equity and venture capital. So we're seeing the creation of that ecosystem slowly but surely also growing. And so you're seeing both multilaterals investing here, the government either through the central bank or through adopting some of the EPC policies are beginning to also set up the venture capital fund that will that should promote entrepreneurship and business. Those, I think, in many ways are helpful, but I think there's a lot more to be done outside of those. So Emil mentioned, for example, the cultural change. I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs will start work and set up their companies, as Yusuf said, without waiting for this to be a multilateral or a government or someone else. And for that to happen, sometimes it's a cultural issue. So if you're at a university and taking an entrepreneurship class, if the professor teaching that class has never set up a business, then there's something they miss at that. You know, you can't teach swimming if you don't know how to swim. So, you know, I'd rather have Yusuf be at that, teach that class, or be at least visiting for a week and say, here's my experience, here's how it's done. Then people will get a real taste for how things are done. And I think those are maybe some of the small but impactful elements that Emil was referring to.
No matter how tolerant you are of failure, you do need to know how to swim to each other's. Reem, I wanted to ask you the next question. We've talked about the challenges, but can you talk a little bit about scaling up now? Sort of, how can value be kept in Jordan once an entrepreneur has passed all these challenges?
I think the short answer to your question is we need to have the fertile ground for businesses not only to start, but also to operate, to scale, to continue growing, and to close if need be. And Dr. Mohammed touched upon the regulations needed for such actions as well. The reality on the ground is a bit challenging. We have the overwhelming majority of companies in Jordan are micro in size. And we have a smaller portion that are small. And then we have a tiny segment that is medium or even large. And these companies are mostly traditional. They're not very productive. They don't produce, high value-added products and services. Don't employ much technology, and honestly, they don't have the internal resources or even the skills to compete internationally or to grow and scale at an international level. Now, the positive aspect is that you really don't need a critical mass of companies to scale in order to impact, positive change on the economy and generate the jobs that we so direly need. A study that was conducted by Endeavor Global actually found that in Greece, for example, in order to grow GDP by 1%, you need 25 scale-ups versus 23,000 traditional micro-businesses to achieve the same impact. In Spain, you would need 101 scale-ups versus 107,000 traditional micro-businesses. So we're really not talking about a massive number of companies to be able to impact the economic change or to generate the jobs that we need. Now, in order for companies to scale, of course, we need to have the framework for these companies to grow and scale. We need to have the policy, the regulatory framework. We need to have the tools in place to facilitate that. So, for example, the regulatory business environment. And again, we need to look at companies or businesses and segment them, because what is relevant for a startup or an SME is not necessarily relevant for a scale-up. While the issues of taxation and labor policies could be extremely relevant for the micro and the small and the growing companies, but issues such as IP and innovation protection can be detrimental for the fast-growing companies that are competing on the global arena. If we're talking about access to finance, which is needed by businesses across the board. But the financing needs of a startup company are very different from the financing need of an SME or from a scale-up. So we need to have the regulatory framework that allows for the development of such financing tools. I mean, in Jordan here, we suffer from that. It's very challenging. Other developed economies, you find a large number of not just banking but also non-banking financial products that meet the various needs of companies at all stages of development. Of course, access to talent is key. When a company is just starting, there's a heavy reliance on the co-founders, and then maybe as it starts growing, they start to train their staff, their employees. But once they scale up and grow internationally, they are going to need to recruit top-notch managers, talent, and to be able to recruit very sophisticated technical expertise as well. So if we don't have all these tools and framework in place that actually is segmented and is focused on the growing needs of companies from startup to scale up, then we will not be able to facilitate that growth and retain this value, which is critical. The minute these companies scale, this is when innovation happens, this is when productivity happens, this is when quality jobs are being created, and this is when the economy is impacted significantly.
So we are almost out of time. I know I could pass it over, but I really want to give the audience an opportunity to ask you questions. Does anybody have a question, Hannah? This gentleman in the front, if we could bring the microphone up here. I think everybody's getting hungry and moving a bit slower. Just here, please. Thank you.
In an entrepreneurship session, I think the word disruption should be we should be focusing more on disruption, because at the end of the day, if you look at the fintechs, the Ubers and all that, they are coming in with a completely different business models that are not sometimes able to expand in a country. And I given the example of the gentleman Yusuf, you mentioned that sometimes you get stuck. And this is the institutional void. You have a certain void that needs to be addressed. And I think Jordan needs a kitchen where people can sit and think how we can adopt, how can we adopt the new disruptive technologies. Fintech is still up till now, it's not clear. Is it a technology company where you don't pay income tax? Or is it a financial company where you pay 35% income tax? Where do you stand? It has to be clear so that you can bring more people coming in. So this ambiguity should be out of the way. And this asymmetry in the information between the regulator and the entrepreneur should be addressed. And I think this is what will open up a very big market for the entrepreneurs once they feel there's a certain element of certainty in the regulation. And if the regulation is not there, we should create it. I mean, renewable energy was the biggest example in Jordan. We did not have renewable energy, but renewable energy started after having the proper framework. We went out, got all the information from outside the world, best practices, and we did it in Jordan. And I don't see why we don't do it in many other sectors in Jordan. So the disruption should be addressed. Blockchain, how are we going to move forward with it, and so on and so forth. We need to have that kitchen on the regulatory side.
Thank you. More of a comment than a question there, but any?
I think it's a great comment, because if we just think of the last few years, say, what do we use most of the time that wasn't here 5 or 10 years ago? Facebook, iPhone, Tesla, drones, 3D printing. It's disrupted in a way that, if you think of what entrepreneurs do, real innovators, not copy pasting, but thinking, coming up with an idea new. I think that's terrific, and it's completely disrupted and changed the way people think. I mean, cryptocurrencies, no one knows. It's it's a black box, but definitely it's a change. And I think when we think of how entrepreneurs should go about doing these things, Yusuf was talking about. Maybe Yusuf should tell us more about it. I mean, it's a terrific idea. Going into farms and using technology and management as a tool that hasn't been used now. Farming's been around for 10,000 years. Yeah. So I think disruption is at the heart of it. Really nice point.
Well, if it's very quick.
No, just to add, I think you're on the mark completely. I mean, one thing I would challenge us to do is to think beyond just incubating disruption, but opening it up. One of the biggest challenges we've had, I think we do incubate, whether legally or illegally, I mean, I don't mean that negatively, but whether formally or informally is a better way to say it, we do. We do a lot of incubation in this country. I think the challenge we have is we've never been able to reap its value because we're afraid to open up the gear and to really allow it to grow here. So we after we prove something, we restrain ourselves. And this is the argument between resilience, which they were talking about this morning, and growth and opportunity, right? I think that a resilience mindset will always never let us maximize our potential as a country, whereas disruption gets us focused on growth. So I completely agree.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to ask you all to thank our panellists. Unfortunately, we are out of time. If you could all stay in your seats, we now have an interview with His Excellency Mr. Imad Fakouri, Minister of Planning and International Cooperation. But please join me in thanking our panellists.